Okay, welcome back to Jimmy's Allotment. Today I'm going to do a special on rhubarb, explaining how it's grown, how to look after it, and what you can do with the rhubarb when you're finished with it. So, rhubarb is actually a vegetable, and as soon as you've got it established into the garden, you won't really need to do much with it at all. This rhubarb here has been here some time. And I just want to explain how to look after it, and how you can crop and get the best results from your rhubarb. So the first points that you need to understand is because it's a vegetable, it's also very quickly growing. It's a very hungry plant, so you need to ensure that it's got plenty of nutrition at all times. The plant is actually made up of two sets of roots, like most plants. There's a main tapping root which goes down around 3 feet into the ground, which is where the water comes from. And then the roots which are closer to the surface of the ground are the roots that absorb all of the nutrients out of the ground. So every year, to grow this like I have here, what I do is I put around 6 to 7 inches of chicken manure onto the soil every year. And the reason I do that is, one, I want to ensure that the nutrition is kept at a high level within the ground, and secondly, rhubarb, with it being, even though it's a vegetable, it's kind of a fruit, it likes irrigaceous soil, which means the acidic level of the soil needs to be high. If you're not sure about the pH or the acidity of your soil, the best thing to do is to get some universal indicator paper, and you need to have a low reading. In other words, it's acidic. So the rhubarb will grow to this kind of level within a couple of weeks. It typically grows, starts to grow at the beginning of April, and within 2 to 3 weeks it will have grown to this level. As soon as it's got to this kind of level, it's time to crop it. So basically the way to crop is, first of all, what you need to do is to grab, you only need your hands to do this. First of all, you get the piece of rhubarb that you want to crop. You take your hand down the rhubarb into the bottom, and then it's a pull towards you. And what you will do is you'll pull off the bottom part of the shoot. You most certainly want to remove that, because if you break this off and leave that will rot, and it can potentially cause problems for the plant. So basically what I did then, just to show you, I put my hand down and pulled the rhubarb out in that motion. Then you should take all of that with the rhubarb. The rhubarb leaf is highly poisonous. It's got a poison in it called dicarbolic acid, which really is quite dangerous. In Victorian times it was actually used as a pesticide. So what people used to do was cut the leaves off from the rhubarb, and they used to boil it up, chop it up and boil it up, and then use that to spray on insects, etc. In greenhouses, particularly aphids and things like that. But if you have small children or anything like that, you most certainly want to dispose of the leaves as soon as you pick it, and obviously keep them away from the plant, because you don't want them to eat the leaf at all. So to prepare your rhubarb, what you want to do is first get rid of the leaf. What you can do this is by hand, which is the way I do it, or you can actually cut it off there, but I do is basically just pull that off and discard the leaf. So that's the actual part that you eat. And to prepare the rhubarb from there, all you need to do is to cut the rhubarb back to the almost through till you get to the skin, and then pull the skin back, and you'll find that that'll come off in one go. And then just go around the rhubarb like that, pulling off the skin. Like that, and so on as you go around, and then from there you can use the rhubarb to make pies, cakes, jams, cordials, whatever you wish. Because there are sinews running through the rhubarb, people typically chop the rhubarb into sort of 1/2 inch lengths, so that you don't get those sort of strandy bits within your food. So basically chop it off sort of like that on the chopping board, and then you will have the rhubarb ready to make with whatever you want. At this time of year, the rhubarb also sends up these flower heads. Now this has gone a bit further than I normally let it go, But what you should do as soon as you see the flower bud forming is, just like you're picking a piece of rhubarb, you go down to the bottom of the plant and pull all of the shoot off, because you don't want that, because basically the plant's putting energy into this part of it rather than the shoots. So basically what you want to do is pull that off and discard it. Now, some people actually grow rhubarb by what's called forcing it, and what you do is, before it's started to grow, when the heads start to form out of the ground, what you do is you put an upturned bin or some kind of container, large container, obviously large enough to contain the plant, and then basically the rhubarb grows within that in the darkness, and what you get is much more tender rhubarb and much smaller leaf. To be honest with you, I personally don't bother doing that, because I find that the rhubarb is tender enough as it is. Obviously it depends on the variety that you've got. Now within this this area here, which is probably around 6 foot across by about 12, 13 foot long, I grow 2 varieties of rhubarb. From here, that way is one type. This type here, as you can see, is slightly different. It's got a redder skin to it, and it's got a much sweeter taste. So this one's quite tart. That one's a much sweeter taste, so that's nicer for making jam. It's also coloured pink. So if you're putting in rhubarb, it's important that you get the right variety for whatever you want to do. If you are transplanting rhubarb, as I explained earlier on, you've got the roots at the top and the main tapping root going down. The best way to do it is to dig a hole down the side of it, because you want to try and keep as much of that tapping root as you can. Also, because it's quite a sappy plant, it needs a lot of water to support the plant, so you don't want to damage that tapping root, because you want to transplant that with the plant so it can absorb the water to, for it to flourish. If you damage that root, the plant won't be able to function correctly until it's obviously corrected itself. So the best way to do that is to dig a hole down the side of the rhubarb, and then by putting a spade in to the ground between the part that you want to remove and the part that you want to keep, put a spade down between, and then try and pull out as much of the tapping root and also the surrounding roots, which take the goodness out of the soil with it, and then transplant that to a place where you've got a weed-free, because this is a perennial plant, wherever you move it to, you want to keep it there. So you want a weed-free border or place where you want to keep it, and you want to put plenty of chicken manure or any sort of acidic substances that you can in there, such as if you don't have chicken manure, you can improve the acidity of the soil by putting old tea bags onto the ground, which will improve the acidity. Or you can actually buy irrigaceous compost, which you can add to the soil to improve the acidity. So if you follow all of those rules, the only additional thing that I would say is, during the winter the whole plant dies off and there is absolutely nothing on the ground. Whilst it's in that state, don't be tempted to walk on the ground, even though you can't see the plant. The new buds for the following year are inside the ground, and by walking on the ground you'll most certainly damage those buds that are under the ground, even in sort of late year, sort of January, February, sort of November, December, January, February, they will be under there, and by walking on the ground. So when I apply the chicken manure, I always do it from the side and apply it on, and maybe just rake it over, but I never actually walk on this bed at all. So thank you for listening. I hope that was of interest and of some use to you if you want to grow your own rhubarb. It's well worth growing rhubarb, because this is a perennial vegetable, so as soon as you've got it established, you don't need to do any work apart from putting some manure on in the winter months. And a border of this size will crop somewhere in the region of £250 worth of rhubarb every year, so it's well, from a financial point of view, it's well worthwhile. So anyway, thank you for listening, and I hope that's some use to you. Bye-bye.